David had always believed that dreams had power. He wasn't born into a rich family, but he had a gift. He could see the world through a different lens, a lens filled with stories, creativity, and endless possibilities. From a young age, he knew he wanted to tell stories through film. Movies had always been his escape, his way to live lives he'd never live and experience emotions he had never felt. But life didn't always work out the way you wanted, did it? David had moved to the city years ago with nothing but hope and a backpack full of scripts. He believed that hard work and persistence would eventually open doors. But the city was tough. The streets were crowded with people like him, dreamers hoping to make it big. He found himself in a small, run-down apartment, barely able to afford rent. Bills piled up, and yet the only thing that mattered to him was his writing. He would spend hours working on his scripts, dreaming of the day he could bring them to life on the big screen. But those days seemed far away. The jobs he could get were far from glamorous. He worked as a barista, served food at a local diner, and even helped with odd jobs around the neighborhood just to make ends meet. Some days he felt the weight of his choices, the dreams that seemed just out of reach, the endless rejection letters from film companies that never even read his scripts, and the loneliness that crept in during the quiet hours of the night. It wasn't just the financial struggle that was difficult for David. It was the emotional toll of seeing his friends, who had once shared his passion, moving on with their lives. Some of them found stable jobs, got married, and started families. Others took safe paths, abandoning their dreams for security. David tried to tell himself that he was different, that he wasn't giving up. But the doubt was always there, lurking in the back of his mind. Was this dream worth all the sacrifices? Was it even realistic to think he could ever break through? His family didn't understand either. His mother, though loving and supportive, constantly worried about him. "You need to find a stable job, son. Something that pays the bills." She would say this with concern in her eyes, but David couldn't bring himself to abandon his passion. No matter how tough things got, he just couldn't. Filmmaking was in his blood, and every part of him longed for the day when his work would be seen by the world. And then there was his younger sister. She had always been the practical one in the family, the one who had her feet on the ground. While David spent his days in coffee shops, working on scripts or waiting for his big break, his sister had moved forward with her life. She'd found a stable job, and while she loved her brother dearly, she couldn't hide her frustration anymore. "David, I just want you to be happy, but you can't keep putting everything on hold. We have bills to pay. Mom's health isn't getting any better. You need to think about the future." Those words stung. He knew she was right. His mother's health was deteriorating, and David felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility. He loved his family deeply, and the guilt he felt about not being able to provide for them weighed heavy on his chest. He wanted to make them proud. He wanted to succeed not just for himself, but for them. The pressure to do so sometimes felt unbearable, and in moments of quiet reflection, he wondered if he had made the right choice in chasing this impossible dream. But then there was something in David that refused to let go. There was something deep inside him, a belief that kept him going even on the hardest days, a belief that one day all the late nights spent writing would pay off, that his films, his stories would someday be seen, understood, and loved. He couldn't explain it. Maybe it was naive. Maybe it was foolish. But it was something that burned inside him, something that wouldn't let him quit. One morning, David sat at his usual table at the local coffee shop. It was his sanctuary, his place of escape from the world outside. The sounds of the coffee machine, the soft chatter of the customers, and the clink of spoons against cups, it all created a rhythm that helped him focus. He pulled out his notebook, full of ideas for a new script. His fingers hovered over the pen, but his mind was distracted. He kept thinking about how much longer he could keep going like this. Just then, the door to the coffee shop swung open, and in walked a figure that David would never have expected to see in a place like this. He blinked, almost in disbelief. There, standing at the counter, was Keanu Reeves. Yes, that Keanu Reeves, the actor. The one from the big screen films that David had grown up watching. The man who had played some of the most iconic roles in cinema history. For a brief moment, David thought he was imagining it. But no, there he was, standing right in front of him. David froze. Should he say something? Should he go up and ask for an autograph? His heart raced as he watched the actor order a coffee in his usual calm, polite manner. But David did nothing. He couldn't move. almost as if he was paralyzed by the surrealness of the moment. He wasn't starstruck per se. He wasn't the type to ask for pictures or autographs. But Keanu Reeves was different. He was more than just a movie star. He was known for his kindness, his humility, and the way he treated everyone with respect no matter who they were. And then, as if fate had decided it was time for something extraordinary to happen, Keanu turned around and caught David's eye. He smiled warmly as if he knew exactly what was going through David's mind. Without missing a beat, he walked over to his table. "Hey there," Keanu said, his voice soft and kind. "Mind if I sit here?" David was taken aback. "Oh, I'm sure," he stammered, feeling his heart race even faster. Keanu sat down, and for a moment they just looked at each other. The noise of the coffee shop faded away, and the world felt like it had come to a complete stop. "So, what's on your mind?" Keanu asked, his eyes scanning the notebook that David had left open on the table. It was filled with scribbles, half-written scenes, and ideas for films. David wasn't sure what to say. He felt vulnerable, like his entire world was laid out in front of this stranger, this actor he had admired for so long. But he couldn't help it. Something about Keanu's presence made him feel comfortable. He found himself telling Keanu everything. The struggles, the rejections, his fears of never making it, and his desperate hope that one day he would be able to share his work with the world. Keanu listened intently, nodding as David spoke. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer pity or false hope. He just listened genuinely, and when David had finished, he leaned back in his chair and smiled. "You know," Keanu said slowly, "life doesn't always work out the way we expect, but sometimes the best things happen when you least expect them. Don't give up. Create your own path. Don't wait for someone to hand you success. Go out and take it." David was speechless. It wasn't the advice he expected to hear, but it was exactly what he needed. Keanu's words had a quiet power to them, as if he truly believed that David could achieve his dreams if he didn't give up. As they parted ways that morning, David felt something shift inside him. For the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. He had always believed that dreams had power. Perhaps now he would begin to believe in himself again. The days following that encounter with Keanu were a blur. David couldn't stop thinking about the conversation they'd had. It was almost as if a switch had been flipped in his mind. The weight he had been carrying around for so long suddenly felt lighter. Maybe it was the way Keanu had spoken to him. Not like a celebrity, but like a friend, someone who truly understood the struggle. Maybe it was the simple fact that someone who had everything had taken the time to talk to him, to listen, and to offer advice that felt genuine. David found himself back at the coffee shop the next morning, sitting at his usual table with his notebook open. But this time, he wasn't just aimlessly writing. He was focused, determined. Keanu's words echoed in his mind. Create your own path. Don't wait for someone to hand you success. That was it. David realized that he had been waiting for someone to notice his scripts, waiting for the right opportunity, waiting for the big break. But waiting wasn't going to get him anywhere. He had to take action. He had to make something happen. With renewed energy, David started reaching out to small independent filmmakers and production companies. He sent emails, made calls, and even attended networking events. But like all the other times before, his efforts seemed to fall flat. The responses were the same. "Thank you, but we're not interested." It was discouraging, to say the least. But David refused to give up. He kept pushing forward, reminding himself of Keanu's advice. It wasn't about the rejection. It was about persistence. One evening, after another long day of sending emails and following up on leads, David sat down on his couch, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. His phone buzzed on the table. He picked it up, expecting another notification from an old friend or a reminder from a colleague about work. But when he saw the name on the screen, his heart skipped a beat. It was a message from Keanu Reeves. David stared at the message, unsure if he was seeing things. He rubbed his eyes and looked at it again. Yes, it was from Keanu. The message read, "Hey, I've been thinking about our conversation. I believe in you and I want to help you. Let's talk soon. Keanu." David sat there frozen, his mind racing. Was this real? Was this a joke? His hands shook as he quickly typed a reply, hoping this wasn't some sort of mistake. "Thank you so much for reaching out. I can't believe you're still thinking about our conversation. I'd love to talk more about how you can help. Within minutes, Keanu responded again. "Let's meet tomorrow. I'll be at the coffee shop around 10 a.m. I have some ideas I'd like to discuss." The next morning, David could barely contain his excitement as he arrived at the coffee shop. His heart was pounding in his chest. This was it. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for. When Keanu walked into the coffee shop, David stood up immediately. Keanu smiled and waved as he approached. He looked just like he did in the movies, calm, collected, and radiating a quiet confidence. But there was something about him that felt different in person. There was a kindness in his eyes that wasn't just for the cameras. It was real. "Hey, how are you doing?" Keanu asked as they sat down together. "I've been following your work and I think you have a lot of potential. But I also know how tough this industry can be. Sometimes you need more than just talent, you need the right opportunities." David nodded, his throat tight. He wasn't sure what to say, but he listened intently, hanging on every word Keanu spoke. "I've been thinking," Keanu continued, "about how I can help. I want to help you create your own path. I want to invest in your future. I believe in what you're doing, and I want to give you the support you need to make it happen." David's breath caught in his chest. Was this really happening? Keanu Reeves, the famous actor, was offering to invest in his future, not just financially, but with mentorship and guidance. He was offering something far more valuable than just money. He was offering David a chance to realize his dreams. Keanu went on, explaining that he had been in the industry for a long time and had seen how difficult it was for new filmmakers to break in. He knew that talent alone wasn't always enough. Sometimes you needed someone to believe in you when no one else did, and right now he wanted to be that person for David. "I don't want you to worry about money or getting stuck in the wrong places. I want you to focus on your work, your vision, and your story," Keanu said. "I can help connect you with the right people, and I'll support you every step of the way. You have the potential to create something special, and I want to see it happen." David's eyes filled with tears as he listened to Keanu. It was more than just an opportunity. It was validation. It was someone telling him that he was worthy of success, that his dreams were not too big or unrealistic. It was the kind of encouragement he had been longing for, and it was coming from someone he had admired for years. "I don't know how to thank you," David said, his voice cracking. "This means more to me than you could ever know." Keanu smiled and placed a hand on David's shoulder. "You don't need to thank me. I'm just helping you get where you belong. Your work speaks for itself. All I'm doing is giving you the platform you deserve." As they continued to talk, Keanu laid out a plan. He would introduce David to some of his connections in the film industry, people who could help him with his scripts, funding, and production. Keanu would also personally invest in David's next project, helping to get it off the ground. But more than that, Keanu promised to be there as a mentor, guiding David through the process of making a film and ensuring that his creative vision wasn't lost along the way. David left the coffee shop that day feeling like a completely different person. His head was spinning with excitement and disbelief. For the first time in years, he felt like he was on the right path. The struggles he had faced, the rejections, the uncertainty, they all seemed worth it now, because someone had seen his potential and was willing to help him bring his dreams to life. Over the next few weeks, things began to change. Keanu kept his word, reaching out to his contacts in the film industry and helping David get meetings with producers, writers, and directors. It wasn't an instant success. There were still challenges to face, still moments of doubt. But David felt more confident than ever. He knew that no matter what happened, he had someone in his corner who truly believed in him, and that belief was enough to keep pushing forward. David worked tirelessly on his scripts, refining his ideas and making sure that every word, every scene, and every character was as strong as it could be. He poured his heart and soul into his work, knowing that this was his chance, his one shot to prove that he was more than just a dreamer. In the midst of all this, he received another message from Keanu. It simply read, "Keep going. You're on the right track." It was all David needed to hear. With that simple message, Keanu had reminded him of why he started this journey in the first place: to tell the stories that mattered to him, to make the films that would speak to others. And now, thanks to Keanu's support, David was closer than ever to turning those dreams into reality. The weeks that followed felt like a whirlwind to David. What had started as an unexpected conversation in a coffee shop with Keanu Reeves had now blossomed into a series of life-changing opportunities. His head was still spinning from everything that had happened. Just a few months ago, he had been sitting alone in his small apartment, wondering if his dreams would ever become a reality. Now he was being invited into meetings with influential people in the film industry, people who could make things happen. David kept working on his scripts, refining his ideas and bringing them to life with more energy than he had ever felt before. Keanu was always there, just a phone call away, offering advice and encouragement whenever David needed it. But it wasn't just about the guidance. Keanu had truly gone above and beyond to make sure David had the resources to succeed. One afternoon, as David sat in his favorite coffee shop, waiting for a meeting with a potential producer, he received an unexpected text. It was from Keanu. "Hey, I've got some exciting news. I think you're ready for the next step. Let's talk later today. I'll call you around 5 p.m. David's heart raced. What could this news be? Was he finally going to get the big break he'd been waiting for? The possibilities swirled in his mind, but he tried to stay calm. He had learned from Keanu that success didn't come in a flash. It was a series of small steps. Still, the anticipation was hard to shake. When 5 p.m. finally rolled around, David answered the phone with a mix of excitement and nerves. "Hey, David. How's it going?" Keanu's familiar voice came through the phone. "I'm doing well. You said you had some news?" Keanu laughed softly. "Yeah, I do. So I've been talking with a few people, and I think it's time to take the next step with your project. I'm ready to help you fund your first film." David froze. His mouth went dry. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Wait, what do you mean? You mean you want to fund the film, my film?" "Exactly," Keanu replied, his voice steady and reassuring. "I think it's time for you to take your ideas from the page to the screen. You've got the talent, the vision. Now you just need the resources to make it happen." "I'm in." David could barely form words. His mind raced as he tried to process what Keanu was saying. This was it. This was the moment he had dreamed of for so long. Keanu Reeves, the actor he had once idolized from afar, was offering to fund his very first film. It wasn't just a handout. It was an investment in his future. Keanu had seen something in David, a spark of potential, and now he was putting his money where his mouth was. I don't even know how to thank you," David said, his voice thick with emotion. "You don't have to thank me," Keanu said, his tone warm but firm. "I believe in you. Now it's time for you to believe in yourself and make this happen. I'll be here every step of the way, but it's your story to tell." The conversation that followed was filled with excitement and detailed plans. Keanu had already contacted some of his own trusted contacts in the industry, producers, film editors, cinematographers, who were willing to work on David's film. The pieces were falling into place faster than David could have ever imagined. As soon as the phone call ended, David sat in stunned silence for a few moments. It felt surreal. He had gone from working in a coffee shop to having the funding and mentorship of one of the biggest names in Hollywood. He knew that this was his shot, his one true chance to make something out of all the hard work and dreams he'd poured into his scripts over the years. The reality of it was both thrilling and overwhelming, but with that excitement came a rush of nervousness. What if he wasn't ready? What if he failed? The doubt crept in quickly, and for a moment David felt the familiar weight of insecurity that had always followed him. But then he remembered Keanu's words. "It's your story to tell." He wasn't doing this for anyone else. He wasn't doing it to prove something to the world. He was doing it because it was his passion, his dream, and now he had the opportunity to make it real. That was enough to push the doubt aside. In the weeks that followed, David dove into pre-production with a level of focus he hadn't experienced before. Keanu was there just as he promised, offering advice, connections, and even helping to finalize some of the film's logistics. The two of them worked closely together, brainstorming ideas, discussing scripts, and talking through every detail of the project. Keanu wasn't just a financial backer. He was actively involved in the creative process, which gave David even more confidence. Having someone like him in the room, someone who had worked on some of the most iconic films of the past few decades, was invaluable. By the time the crew was assembled and the filming began, David could hardly believe what was happening. He was standing on set directing actors, calling the shots, and watching his vision come to life. This was the moment he had dreamed of for so long, the moment when his stories would no longer be confined to the pages of notebooks and screens, but would be shared with the world. Keanu made sure to be there whenever David needed him. Whether it was giving feedback on a scene or simply offering a word of encouragement, Keanu was a constant presence. But he never took over. He knew when to step back and let David find his own rhythm. The whole process was a learning experience, but it was also exhilarating. For every challenge that arose, David found a way to face it head-on, knowing that he had the support he needed to succeed. A few weeks into filming, there was a particularly challenging scene. David had written it to be emotionally intense, requiring the actors to dig deep and pull from personal experiences. The pressure was on to get it just right. The actors were nervous, and David could feel the tension in the air. But just as they were about to begin, Keanu walked onto the set, calm as ever, and offered a few quiet words of encouragement to the cast. "Don't think about the camera," he said to the actors. "Think about the story. Let the emotions flow naturally. Trust in what you're doing and everything will fall into place." David watched as the actors took a deep breath and nodded. The scene went on to be one of the most powerful moments of the entire film. That day, David realized just how lucky he was, not just for the opportunity to make his film, but for the incredible guidance and support he had received from someone who truly cared about his success. By the time the film was complete, David was exhausted, but fulfilled. He had poured everything he had into it. It wasn't just a job. It was his passion, his heart and soul woven into every frame. And when the final cut was done, Keanu stood by him, proud of the work they had accomplished together. "It's your vision, David," Keanu said with a smile. "You did this. I'm just glad I could help make it happen." David couldn't help but smile back. He had done it. He had made his film, and it was better than he had ever imagined. It was real, and it was only the beginning. The premiere of the film was set for a cool autumn evening. David was pacing around his small apartment, the weight of everything pressing on him. It had been weeks since they had finished filming, and now the final product was ready to be shown to the world. He'd spent countless hours reviewing the edit, tweaking the smallest details, making sure everything was perfect. This film wasn't just a project. It was the culmination of his dreams, the hard work of months, and the support of someone who believed in him more than he ever thought possible. Keanu's words echoed in his mind. "You did this." David had to remind himself of that. It was his vision, his effort, and it was now time to let it stand on its own. The theater where the premiere was being held was filled with people, some of them strangers, some familiar faces who had supported him throughout the journey. But the one person David was most eager to see was Keanu. He knew that Keanu had already seen the film. It had been part of their collaboration, but tonight, he would sit in the audience, watching as David's hard work was finally shared with the world. As David stood at the front of the room, looking out over the crowd, he felt a rush of nerves. It wasn't the kind of nerves that came from being on stage or facing criticism. It was the nerves of wondering if the audience would see what he saw in the film. Would they feel the same passion, the same connection? Would they understand what he was trying to say? Keanu walked in just as the lights dimmed, his quiet presence bringing a sense of calm to David. He gave him a reassuring nod before taking his seat in the back. David gave a quick thank you speech, his voice shaking slightly with emotion. He had never imagined that he would be here, standing in front of a crowd talking about a film that he had made himself. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey. Every step, every setback, and every triumph had led him to this moment. The film began, and the room fell silent. As the opening credits rolled, David's heart raced. This was the moment. The moment when his work would be judged, not just by critics, but by real people who would connect with it, or not. He could feel the weight of their eyes on him, even though he was seated in the audience like everyone else. As the film played out on the big screen, David felt a mix of pride and anxiety. He watched the scenes unfold, remembering the long hours spent on set, the challenges they had faced, and the sacrifices everyone had made to bring this story to life. But there was something else too, something he hadn't expected. As he sat there, he began to realize that the film wasn't just a story about characters on the screen. It was about him. It was about his journey, his struggles, his dreams. It was personal and it was real. The final scenes came and David found himself holding his breath. This was it, the ending that had taken weeks to perfect, the payoff that would leave the audience either satisfied or wanting more. He had spent hours adjusting the pacing, making sure the emotions would land just right. He wanted the audience to feel the same catharsis that he had felt when he first wrote those final lines. As the credits rolled and the lights slowly brightened, David looked around the room. There was a silence at first, a sort of collective holding of breath as everyone processed what they had just witnessed. And then slowly the applause began. At first it was hesitant, almost like the crowd wasn't sure how to react. But soon it grew louder, more certain, and more enthusiastic. David's chest swelled with emotion. This was it. This was the validation he had been hoping for. He had made something that resonated with people. The journey had been hard, the road had been long, but it had been worth it. The applause wasn't just for the film. It was for his perseverance, for his dedication, and for the belief that someone, a stranger, had placed in him when he was at his lowest. Keanu stood up from his seat, applauding along with the rest of the audience. David caught his eye and gave a small, grateful nod. Keanu smiled back, a proud look on his face as if to say, "I knew you could do it." After the screening, there was a reception where people gathered to talk about the film, share their thoughts, and offer congratulations. David found himself surrounded by a group of filmmakers, critics, and industry professionals who were eager to talk to him. For the first time in his life, he was the one being asked questions. He was the one people wanted to hear from. "So what's next?" one of the producers asked him, his eyes alight with interest. "Do you have another project in mind?" David paused for a moment, taking in the excitement and admiration around him. He had always dreamed of this moment, but now that it was here, it felt surreal. He was finally being taken seriously as a filmmaker. It was the kind of recognition he had always wanted, but it was also a little overwhelming. "I do," David said, his voice steady. "I've got a few more ideas I'm working on. But for now, I'm just grateful for the chance to be here, to have made this film. It's been a long road, and I couldn't have done it without the support of so many people." "And Keanu," someone added with a smile. "I heard he was a big part of the process." David looked over to where Keanu was talking with another group of filmmakers. He nodded. "Yeah, Keanu's been amazing. I don't think I could have gotten here without him. He believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." The producer nodded thoughtfully. "It's rare to find someone like that in this business. He's a good man, and you've clearly got something special. I'm looking forward to seeing what you do next." As the night went on, the conversations continued, and David found himself at the center of it all. He was talking about his film with passion, fielding questions about his next steps and soaking in every moment. The night felt like a dream, one that he was finally living. Keanu, ever humble, had slipped away from the crowd, but not before giving David one last piece of advice. He pulled him aside before leaving. "You did great tonight," Keanu said with a sincere smile. "But don't forget, the journey is just beginning. The real work starts now. Keep pushing yourself. Keep telling the stories that matter." David smiled back, grateful for the guidance. He had learned so much from Keanu, not just about filmmaking, but about perseverance, humility, and the importance of believing in yourself when no one else does. As the evening came to a close and people started to trickle out of the theater, David stood by the exit, watching the crowd slowly disappear into the night. He felt a sense of peace. It wasn't just about the success of the film. It was about how far he had come, how far he had grown. For the first time in a long time, David felt like he had truly found his place in the world. The months that followed the premiere felt like a blur to David. After the success of the film, the calls started coming in. People wanted to meet with him, hear about his journey, and, most importantly, offer him new opportunities. Film producers, agents, even major studios were eager to talk about the future. But amidst the whirlwind of attention, David remained grounded. It was easy to get lost in the excitement, but he had learned something crucial from Keanu. The work was never over. The film might have been done, but the journey was ongoing. Keanu had stayed in touch, of course, sending the occasional message or picking up the phone for a quick chat. He was always there when David needed advice, but he also made it clear that David needed to carve his own path now. "You've got this," Keanu often said. "You know what to do. Trust your instincts." It was a simple line, but it was all David needed to hear. Keanu had believed in him, and now David had to believe in himself. Despite the newfound fame, David kept his feet firmly planted in the ground. He continued working on new projects, pouring his heart into scripts that felt just as personal as the first one. He remembered the feeling of sitting in his cramped apartment, struggling to make ends meet, and how far he had come from those lonely days. Each new script, each new idea, felt like a chance to prove to himself that he had more to offer than just the first success. But with this new sense of confidence came a new set of challenges. The world was watching now. There was pressure to do even better, to make something that would surpass what he had already achieved. The weight of expectations was heavy, but David didn't let it overwhelm him. He knew that making art wasn't about the pressure to succeed. It was about the love of the craft, the need to tell stories that mattered. David took some time off after the premiere, just to breathe. He spent long days walking through the city thinking. There were moments when the quiet, peaceful solitude gave him the clarity he needed. He thought about his film, the story he had told, and how it had touched people. The feedback from the audience was overwhelmingly positive, and people often told him how much the film had meant to them. But as much as that praise felt good, David knew that it wasn't the applause that mattered most. It was the fact that he had created something real, something that came from deep within him. One morning, as David sat in a small cafe, sipping coffee and watching the world go by, he received a call from Keanu. It wasn't unusual for Keanu to check in, but this call felt different. There was an urgency in Keanu's voice, something David hadn't heard before. "Hey, David, I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day," Keanu began. "You mentioned that you were feeling the pressure of expectations. I get that. But listen to me carefully, don't let that control you. The minute you start thinking about what others want, you lose the magic of why you started doing this in the first place. You do it because you love it. Always remember that." David sat up straighter, absorbing the words. He hadn't realized how much he had been thinking about what others expected of him. Somewhere along the way, he had allowed the external pressure to creep in, forgetting the reason he had started making films to begin with. It wasn't for fame or recognition. It was for the joy of creation, for the thrill of telling stories that connected with people on a deeper level. "Thanks, Keanu," David said, his voice steady. "I needed to hear that." "Anytime," Keanu replied with his signature calm. "And remember, I'm still here if you need to talk or just bounce ideas around." With that, the call ended, but David felt a renewed sense of clarity. He didn't need to chase approval or be the next big thing. He just needed to keep telling stories, and if people resonated with them, that was enough. As time went on, David's career continued to rise. His next project, a documentary about the struggles of independent filmmakers, was a massive hit. It wasn't a flashy Hollywood production with big-name stars, but it was raw and authentic, much like his first film. People appreciated that honesty, and the film garnered critical acclaim. David didn't chase awards or recognition. They came anyway, along with invitations to festivals and collaborations with talented filmmakers. Through all of this, David remained the same person he had been when he was working in the coffee shop. He was just a man with a dream, trying to make a difference in the world through his art. And the more successful he became, the more he remembered the moments of struggle, the sleepless nights, the self-doubt, the loneliness. He knew what it felt like to be at the bottom, and he never forgot the people who had lifted him up along the way. Keanu was one of those people. Despite his own busy career, Keanu continued to check in on David, offering advice when needed, sharing his wisdom, and never expecting anything in return. Their relationship had evolved into something more than just mentor and mentee. It was a genuine friendship. Keanu had always treated David with respect, and that respect had created a bond that would last far beyond the world of film. One day, as David was sitting in a meeting with a group of producers, discussing his next project, his phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Keanu. "Don't forget why you started." David smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Keanu was right. It was easy to get swept up in the whirlwind of success, but the most important thing was to stay true to himself. He had started making films because he wanted to share stories with the world, not because he wanted to be famous or rich. As the years passed, David's career continued to grow, but he remained humble and grounded. He used his platform to support new filmmakers, just as Keanu had supported him. He understood now that success wasn't just about what you could achieve for yourself. It was about how you could help others along the way. David took on the role of mentor, just as Keanu had done for him. He would meet with young filmmakers, give them advice and offer encouragement, just as Keanu had done for him all those years ago. The industry had changed a lot over the years, but David had never lost sight of what was truly important. He still believed in the power of storytelling, the impact of art, and the importance of kindness and generosity in the creative world. And when people would ask him how he had made it to the top, he would always smile and tell them the same thing. It wasn't just me. It was the people who believed in me, who helped me along the way. I'm here because of them and because of my own belief in what I could do. Don't let the world tell you what you can't do. Believe in yourself and you'll go further than you ever imagined. David's journey had come full circle. From the lonely, uncertain days in his apartment to the bright lights of the film industry, he had proven to himself and to the world that with hard work, determination, and the right support, anything was possible. And as he looked back on it all, he knew one thing for sure. He would never have made it without that one chance encounter with Keanu Reeves, a man who had seen something in him when he couldn't even see it in himself. And for that, David would be forever grateful.